Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me tonight. My name is Dr. Trish Pierce of Advaita Natural Wellness, and tonight we're going to be talking about conquering chronic fatigue and adrenal dysfunction. Hopefully you're here after a long day's work and you're just settling in and just chill out and enjoy the presentation. So a little bit about me. Like I said, my name is Dr. Pierce. I usually go by Dr. Trish. I'm a naturopathic doctor. I graduated from National University of Health Sciences in Lombard, Illinois. I specialize in autoimmune conditions, women's health, digestive conditions, and adrenal dysfunction, like we're going to be talking about tonight. My continuing education involves a lot of functional medicine and inflammation. I am currently taking the Inflammation Mastery series by Dr. Alex Vasquez, and I also do some of the Seeking Health by Dr. Ben Lynch, which is involved in the naturopathic genetic analysis, which we'll be talking about later. My interests include bodybuilding. I've been bodybuilding since July of 2012. I love to hike. I'm a voracious reader, gardening, and I care for my own personal zoo at home, which involves 2 dogs, 2 cats, a lizard, and many fish, one of which I have on my desk right here at work. The associations I belong to, American Association of Naturopathic Physicians and the ILAMP, the Illinois Association. So first, I want to talk a little bit about what naturopathic medicine is. I know there is a lot of confusion out there. A lot of times people will think that we're the same thing as a homeopath or a naturopath. They'll even kind of confuse us with people who call themselves naturopaths but aren't actually naturopathic doctors. So the root word of naturopathic is nature and pathic, which is disease. So basically what we're talking about is a system of medicine that heals the body through natural means. Naturopathic doctors are trained at one of only eight, accredited schools in the US and Canada. It is a 4-year post-bachelor's degree program, so it is a doctorate. Currently, only 17 states and the District of Columbia are licensed and regulating naturopathic doctors. Unfortunately, Illinois is not one of those states yet, but we are pushing in 2017 to make that happen for us. Some of the foundational principles of naturopathic medicine, I think these are very important to truly understanding what NDs do for a living. These are the tenets that we all work by. It's our philosophy. So the first one is nature has a healing power. So that is to say your body wants to be healthy. That is its innate and natural state is health. So if we create the conditions for health, we tend to move towards it. Identify and remove underlying causes of illness rather than seek to mask or eliminate symptoms. So this one is one that's very important to me. What we do instead of, giving you an Advil for pain is we find out where did that pain come from in the first place and we remove that trigger. Do no harm, which is of course inherent to every system of medicine, which is especially important to naturopathic medicine because the substances that we use are actually fairly harmless. They have minimal side effects. The fourth one here, the doctor is a teacher, is my absolute favorite. And, in practice, this is what I try to emulate the most. My biggest responsibility to you is your education. I think that the system of medicine that we're currently in, you tend to, go to the doctor's office, you spend 15 minutes with your doctor, you don't really get a chance to ask questions. The doctor kind of hands your prescription and you walk out not really knowing what caused your illness, not really knowing how to empower yourself to be healthy. So what we try to do here at Advaita is make sure that you are fully aware of how to take control of your own health. We also treat every person like an individual. So we do follow a standard of care in the sense that, we make sure that everything is being done for your particular condition, but we realize that everyone is an individual person. You have different physical, mental, emotional, genetic, social factors, and these are unique to you. We emphasize disease prevention, of course. We don't wait for people to be really sick before we do something about it. What we like to do is, we start when your symptoms first start to appear, ideally, or even before symptoms appear. We just create the conditions for health so you can have a lifelong healthy lifestyle. So this is a pyramid that we see over and over again in school. Ignore the colored things to the right and left for now, and I'll just kind of walk you through what this naturopathic approach to health is. So it is shaped like a pyramid. because we start at the bottom, and the bottom is the base and the most important part of taking control of your health. So first, what we do is we create the conditions for health using the determinants. And what we mean by the determinants is things that are inherent to your lifestyle. So diet, exercise, sleep, even things like exposure to sunlight are very important to human beings. That's evolutionarily speaking, that is the environment that we live in, and those are the things that are most important to our health. At Veta, usually diet is, of those, probably the thing we focus on the most, partially because we as Americans have such unhealthy diets and because diet can make such a significant difference in people's health. The next one, stimulate the vis. This might be a little foreign to a lot of people. What we mean by vis is something called the vis meditrix naturae, which is to say nature has healing powers. So like we said in one of the previous slides, nature has healing power as the first tenet of naturopathic medicine. When we stimulate the vis, what we're saying is we're encouraging the body to heal itself. Supporting tissues and organ systems. So this can involve multiple things. This can go back to diet. This can go to targeted nutritional supplementation. A good example of something at this level is like glutamine for the gut. You take glutamine to help heal your gut cells. So what we're doing is we're focusing on the particular organ system and how to heal that. The next one is restore structural integrity. NDs are trained to, do something similar to chiropractic adjustments. We call them spinal manipulations. We do get some soft tissue work, these types of things. Unfortunately, in an unlicensed state, we're not really allowed to do those things. But that is definitely something that we consider to be very important for overall health. The next is natural symptom control. This is an interesting one because it kind of goes back to the initial supporting tissues and organ systems. But what we're doing here is, say you're in a great deal of musculoskeletal pain, we might give you something like turmeric to help you control that pain. Now that supplement is, going to go on to do other important things as well, but what we're looking for there is to reduce the pain. Drug-based symptom control and high force interventions. Now, those are the things we're talking about, like antibiotics, we're talking about steroids, surgeries at the very tip of the pyramid if necessary. NDs, for the most part, don't really work in this realm. So now if we move on to these colored portions here, just to give you an idea of how, NDs are different and similar to the other professionals. So we have up here, we have MDs and DOs working with high force and drug-based control. Of course, everybody knows that. We do often see MDs who are more complementary, more integrative medicine based. So they'll tend to come down here, maybe to the natural symptom control. They might go down even further, which is great. What we do see a lot of times with MDs and DOs who are working more holistically is we'll see them do something called green allopathy, is what we call it. So basically, instead of giving you a drug for your pain, they might just give you a supplement for your pain instead, if that makes sense. DCs, so chiropractors, they tend to work with, of course, natural symptom control. Restoring structural integrity is going to be the biggest thing DCs will do. However, there are some functional medicine DCs who will come down here, support tissues and systems. Homeopaths and acupuncturists, these are mostly energy workers. They're working here, stimulating the vis. I get a lot of times I get asked, well, is an ND the same thing as a nutritionist? And I'll say, no, kind of, we work with nutrition, but that's not the only thing we do. That's what nutritionists tend to focus on. Nutritionists will tend to focus on diet. Sometimes they'll do some supplementation, some exercise, but of course their biggest goal is to fix your diet. So we come over here to NDs. This is where we are working the most. So like I said, for the most part, what we do is we work down here with determinants because those are going to be the things that make the biggest impact on your health. Like, I can't stress that enough. And we'll move up the pyramid as necessary. Now, we will even go up as high as high force or drug-based symptom control. It just depends on the person. It depends on the individual case. In states where we're licensed, we might actually prescribe drugs. In states where we're not, if we feel you need drugs, if we feel that's something that's pertinent to your condition, what we'll do is just go ahead and refer you for them, and that's not a problem. So I hope this has cleared up a little bit for anyone who's kind of watching and wondering, well, what the heck is an ND? I hope that's cleared it a little up for you. So another question I get asked commonly, is naturopathic medicine evidence-based? And I hear a lot of, no, it's not, and we don't really use the clinical-based trial. I want to clear this up for us. So we are educated naturopathic doctors, that is to say, not, you can be the type of naturopath that has gotten your degree online. There are people who just call themselves naturopaths who aren't actually trained as naturopathic physicians. But true NDs are educated within the model of an evidence-based practice. So basically what that means is we use interventions that have the backing of peer-reviewed studies. So when it's possible, it is our preference to use things that have been proven to be effective via studies. So lifestyle interventions, nutritional supplementation, herbal medicine. There are tons and tons of studies out there that support the interventions that naturopaths use. In conventional medicine, a single intervention, double-blind, and placebo-controlled trial is the gold standard. That's in conventional allopathic medicine. And why would this be? Why would that be the gold standard? Because the researchers are seeking to basically qualify and quantify the efficacy of a single intervention, typically a drug. When they're doing these single intervention, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials, it's on one thing, and that's that one drug because they want to see how effective it is. So that makes sense. When it comes to that paradigm of medicine, that does make sense, and that would be the gold standard. However, the gold standard in allopathic medicine is a poor standard by which to judge naturopaths, chiropractors, anything basically that's complementary and alternative. And why is that? Basically because holistic medicine, it's in the name. By its nature, holistic medicine is going to have the person's health as a whole. Unique constitution, unique lifestyle, personal history, rather than the basis of one symptom, one condition. We're looking at the whole person. So there's that, and there's also the fact, maybe even more importantly, that naturopathic medicine uses interventions that are designed to have a cumulative effect. So when we're talking about individualized interventions, we're talking about botanical medicine, nutritional supplementation, all of these things work together to have a synergistic effect that can't be mimicked by a single intervention or a drug-based approach, of course, because, if you're combining diet and exercise and you're taking a botanical medicine supplement and you're taking a vitamin, all of these things, taken individually, maybe they wouldn't have that big of an effect. If all you were taking was, say, magnesium, that might not have the biggest effect. But when you take magnesium in combination with diet and all the other things, that's when you're going to notice a difference. So when we talk about conventional medicine, their standard of care, what they're looking at is a system that says disease X. So let's just make an example here. Let's say hypothyroidism is disease X, is treated by drug Y, right? So hypothyroidism is treated by Synthroid, and that is the standard of care. So I kind of liken this to a one-size-all approach versus professional tailoring. So I think it's kind of funny because, you have this comic here, and I think this really reflects it well. People come in all types. Everyone's an individual. So the one-size-fits-all approach might not necessarily work for everyone. Maybe one person takes that Synthroid for their hypothyroidism and they feel great, and that's wonderful for them. But another person takes it and it's just not doing the job. So we're looking at a one-size-fits-all versus naturopathic, very individualized lifestyle intervention, which is like having your own personal tailor. You're sending your suit in, and they're making very specific adjustments according to your measurements. So let's talk about the conventional naturopathic approach to what we were talking about tonight, which is chronic fatigue and adrenal dysfunction. So when I was doing the research for this webinar, I thought this was funny because, I was trying to get a sense of what is the current conventional opinion of adrenal dysfunction, right? And I found this study, and this is very recent. This is recent, and this is an opinion I've heard quite a bit. Adrenal fatigue does not exist. It's a systemic review, so that means it's reviewed many different papers that all say or come to the same conclusion, which is adrenal fatigue does not exist. So that's kind of the conventional approach. So I was wondering, well, gee, I mean, what am I even doing in this webinar? Does it exist? Um, it does exist. So these are just, I mean, a very small sampling of the studies I was able to find within perhaps 10 minutes. There's a lot more out there. Basically, what it comes down to is the term adrenal fatigue is familiar to us in a sense, but isn't perhaps the most accurate way to describe what we're actually talking about, which is HPA axis impairment. So what we're doing as NDs, or what I'm doing in this webinar by saying adrenal dysfunction, I'm saying it to be simple, right? So instead of saying a multifactorial HPA axis impairment associated with states of increased stress, I'm just calling it adrenal dysfunction, basically for simplicity. But I think it's ironic and funny and a little ridiculous that there's studies out there that say adrenal dysfunction that does not exist, because it's misleading. It's misleading because it does exist. It just might be called something different. Let's talk a little bit about chronic fatigue now. So this study, a systemic review of drug therapies for chronic fatigue. Chronic fatigue is one of these diagnoses that are made basically in lieu of being able to find something more definitive. So another one that comes to mind, for example, is irritable bowel syndrome. You know, you have something that's not necessarily, qualified with a diagnosis like, say, Crohn's disease. It's basically a way of saying, hey, this is the pattern of what's going on with you, but we're really not sure what's causing it, and we're not necessarily sure about what to do about it, right? So chronic fatigue is, this could involve, it could be anyone. It could be caused by anything. They've come up with some parameters for it, which is to say, if you're chronically fatigued, you're exhausted all the time, you might have insomnia, you might have widespread pain, you might have swollen lymph nodes. So these are the things that they use to identify chronic fatigue, but that's not to say that they actually know what chronic fatigue is or what to do about it. So in this study, the conclusion was these findings indicate that no universal pharmaceutical treatment can be recommended. So that is to say basically what I just said. Since they don't really know what's causing it, they don't really know what to do about it. So I looked up WebMD, Mayo Clinic, and Medscape. The only current treatment options, this is it, conventionally, are antivirals, NSAIDs, narcotics, antidepressants, and drugs for sleep. This is very unfortunate because many times this just does not do it for people that are chronically fatigued. So let's talk about naturopathic approaches to chronic fatigue and stress reduction. This is another one of those things that's ironic to me, because here we have this systemic review saying, hey, there's really no good treatment that we can recommend. Then we start asking ourselves, how would a naturopath approach this? And here's what we find. I mean, all sorts. There's all sorts of things that can be done for chronic fatigue, and it is scientifically proven that they work. So I just, here's some more. It's just, it's funny, the two different approaches, the drug-based, one size fits all approach versus the naturopathic approach of let's figure out what the root cause is and address that. So here is a naturopathic pyramid that I've made basically to fit the adrenal dysfunction and chronic fatigue parameters. So here we have basically what we said before. I've shortened it a little bit. So what we're talking about naturopathically is what we're going to do: remove and mitigate the obstacles to adrenal health. We're going to address the conditions for adrenal health. Diet, exercise, and sleep, I would say at least, is 75% of the battle, at least. Support the HPA axis and other organs using targeted nutritional and botanical supplementation. That's important to note, the targeted part, because there's sometimes people will take stabs in the dark. Well, I heard that this might help, so I'll take this. And, a lot of times that doesn't work, because what you really need to do is you need to fit the supplement to the person. We can alleviate symptoms associated with natural interventions. So like I said before, this is something where, instead of directly treating the organs and tissues, we're just kind of treating the symptom. Good example of this one would be you can't sleep, you have insomnia, you take melatonin. That's a good example. And at the top of the pyramid, we have further testing when necessary. So question, is chronic fatigue always caused by adrenal dysfunction? No. There is no direct correlation always between chronic fatigue and adrenal dysfunction. They're just commonly related. It's always important to rule out other causes of chronic fatigue. Other causes are things like hypothyroidism, anemia, Lyme disease, infection, autoimmune conditions. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And we want to make sure that those things are ruled out, and that, you know, we're seeking a different cause, perhaps adrenal dysfunction, perhaps something else, but we're not missing something big. After the pathology has been ruled out, a detailed history is absolutely essential. So you get a good doc, what they're going to do is they're going to sit down with you. They might take an hour. They might take more than that. But what you're trying to do is dig to get to the bottom, leave no stone unturned to figure out what it is that's causing the chronic fatigue in the first place. So let's talk about some symptoms of adrenal dysfunction. Adrenal dysfunction is one of those things where the symptoms can be, there's a multitude of them. They're very varied. But typically what we will see is insomnia and poor sleep quality. This is someone who, you know, you lay down at night and you just kind of like lay there, and you're staring at the ceiling and your mind is racing. You can't seem to shut it off. You might finally fall asleep a couple hours later. Maybe you're waking up through the night. In the morning, you're groggy. You don't really want to get out of bed. So just poor sleep quality and having a hard time falling asleep and staying asleep. We see fatigue throughout the day, constant desire to nap. Or you have fatigue throughout the day and then you have that one time, and you'll know this if you know what I'm talking about. You have that one time a day, maybe it's 3 o'clock, maybe it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you've been at work for a while and you're just crashing. You're crashing, you need to get a candy bar, you need to get a cup of coffee. What you really want to do is go to sleep, but you can't because you're at work. So we see that very commonly. Mental emotional symptoms like depression and anxiety, very, very common in association with adrenal dysfunction. Brain fog, diminished memory, difficulty concentrating, weight gain and difficulty losing weight, very, very common. Muscle and joint pain, cramps and weakness, digestive symptoms, constipation, diarrhea, symptoms of low blood sugar. So many times people have this, they don't necessarily know what it is. So, you know, you're going all day. You haven't eaten for a while, maybe you skipped breakfast, maybe you didn't even really grab anything much for lunch, or you had something light for lunch, and all of a sudden you just are feeling crummy. You're feeling nauseous, you're feeling kind of lightheaded, kind of dizzy. What's going on there is your blood sugar has just tanked. So blood glucose is what's in our bloodstream at all times to give us energy to go. If you don't eat, you have no very efficient way of making blood glucose to make up for the fact that you didn't eat. So you feel that. Your brain suffers. Your brain uses a huge percentage of the glucose in your body. So you get things like brain fog. You get that lightheadedness. You might get very irritable. These are signs of low blood sugar. And then in conjunction, you even may get cravings for sugar. You know, you might reach a point in your life where you're like, hey, you know, I never really had a sweet tooth, but now I have like a massive sweet tooth and I like can't stop eating candy. Might be the same story for salt, but these are very common in adrenal dysfunction. And like I said, there's more symptoms than this. This is just what we commonly see. And I would say, you know, the exhaustion is probably one of the biggest red flags for this. So let's talk a little bit about the HPA axis. I mentioned it before, I didn't really explain what it was. So this is kind of an overly simplified diagram of what's going on in your HPA axis. So basically your HPA axis is part of your endocrine system. And when you say endocrine system, all you're talking about is a system of organs and tissues that use hormones to communicate with each other. So hormones are basically little chemical messengers that travel in your bloodstream, go to different organs and tissues, and that's how your organs and tissues communicate. So your HPA axis is your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. The biggest responsibility here is the fight or flight response to stress. So, you know, you're in your car, you have to slam on your brakes, and you get that like rush of anxiety and your heart's pounding, you're sweating a little bit, that's what we're talking about. That is the fight or flight response. So when a stressor is encountered, basically this is what happens. The hypothalamus gets a signal to, oh no, the body's like freaking out, like we need to do something about this. Hypothalamus is in the brain. So from the hypothalamus talks to the pituitary gland, which is what we also call our master gland, because the pituitary basically links your central nervous system to the rest of your endocrine system. So any messages that your brain wants to send to your body, your brain will first use your hypothalamus. It'll use your pituitary to talk, so that the pituitary is kind of like a middleman. He kind of is the one that sends out all the messages. So your pituitary then talks to your adrenal glands. Your pituitary tells your adrenal glands, hey, there's a huge stressor here. We're running from a bear. We're escaping from a tiger, whatever it is. Make cortisol, make adrenaline. So we're not going to talk about adrenaline too much because that's kind of a bit of a separate issue. But adrenaline is what people usually think of when they think of the fight or flight response. They're like, oh, fight or flight, adrenaline. And that's true. The one that gets neglected to be mentioned, and the one that's going to be very important in this presentation, is cortisol. So cortisol is the hormone that tells your body we need blood sugar for energy right now, right? So once there's enough cortisol going around in your body, there's enough blood sugar, your body has coped with whatever the stressor is, your hypothalamus is actually able to see that there's enough hormone and stop production. Enough hormone, stop, the whole system shuts down. That is what we want in an ideal situation. So we kind of already talked about this, but the cortisol is made in the adrenal cortex of the adrenal glands, which is to say the outer portion, responsible for creating blood sugar. It also can facilitate the creation of blood sugar from other sources. So like I said before, what if you're in a situation where you haven't eaten for 12 hours and you don't have a source of readily available blood sugar from a meal? What cortisol will help do is it'll actually take amino acids, which come from protein, which oftentimes comes from your muscles, and fat, and make sugar out of it. This is called gluconeogenesis. So cortisol will do whatever it can to raise your blood sugar. In low to moderate levels, cortisol is actually anti-inflammatory. It's good for you. In very high levels, it can be an immune suppressant. And people are familiar with this because many times cortisol is given as a drug, often called cortisone, glucocorticoid, prednisone. These forms of cortisol or synthetic cortisol are used as immune suppressants, which probably a lot of you are familiar with. Pathologically high levels of cortisol is called Cushing's syndrome, and pathologically low levels are called Addison's. Now, these are the two syndromes on opposite ends of the spectrum that conventional medicine typically recognizes as being real things. So on the one end, we have very high levels. You have Cushing's disease. Addison's disease on the other end, very low levels. The current school of thought is that there's not really any in between. There is the in between. It's what we're talking about. But pathologically speaking, they really don't have a treatment per se to offer unless you're, have one of those two diseases. Adrenaline we hit on a little bit. That's another one that's released by your adrenal glands in response to stress. That's the one that makes your heart pound and your pupils constrict, your blood pressure go up. It's also responsible for that anxious feeling you get when you're in a stressful situation. So let's ask ourselves, what happens if a stress response is ongoing? That is to say, what happens if instead of just seeing a bear and running from a bear and escaping and then everything calming down, what happens if we're constantly under stress? Basically most of our lifestyles, right? So prolonged stress has actually been shown to continuously activate the HPA axis and override that feedback loop that tells it to shut off. One of those million studies I showed you guys back in the beginning, one of those studies was the one that showed this happening. So HPA axis overactivation, right? This will very detrimentally affect the delicate balance between cortisol and other hormones. Probably one of the bigger ones we think about the cortisol-melatonin relationship, and we'll get to that in a little while. But these high levels of cortisol and this HPA activation can lead to a wide array of different problems: gastrointestinal, neurological, musculoskeletal, endocrine, respiratory, immune, you name it, it can lead to it. So eventually, this cascade of negative effects from stress, if it goes on long enough, can lead to what we call one of the 3 stages of adrenal maladaptation. So here are the stages. These were developed by a man, an endocrinologist, named Dr. Hans Selye, 1930s. He wrote a paper on it. The stages are alarm, resistance, and exhaustion. So basically what we have in alarm stage, or the first stage, is too much cortisol being produced, right? So you have stressors all the time. What are your stressors? Your stressors are your boss screaming at you at work, right? Your stressors are traffic. Maybe your kids are stressing you out. Things that we are aware of that cause us stress. Other hidden stressors, another thing we'll get to in a little while, are things like a bad diet or lack of exercise, things that you know are affecting you, but you're maybe not consciously aware of affecting you. All of these things piling up will lead to too much cortisol being produced. The second stage is resistance. This is too much cortisol being produced, just like the first stage, but the signals are starting to get crossed. Cortisol is starting to be produced at the wrong time of day. Okay, cortisol is usually at its highest level in the morning upon waking. That's to get your blood sugar going, to get your energy, to get through your morning and get through your day. And it should be at its lowest levels at night, obviously, because you don't want to be wide awake at night. What can happen in resistance is you can get basically an aberrant pattern of that, but even more commonly is really high cortisol at night and really low cortisol in the morning. So basically you see a switching of what's normal. In stage 3 or exhaustion, your cortisol has been being produced at high levels for so long, now other things are starting to be affected. Sometimes we see thyroid problems. Sometimes we see female reproductive problems, very common. Autoimmunity, it's the fact that this demand has been going on for so long that other systems of the body really can't keep up with it. So some silent stressors, like I touched on, processed and inflammatory foods, huge. Poorly regulated blood sugar, can't stress it enough. Disrupted circadian rhythms. So this is your exposure to light and dark. Right now I'm doing this webinar at 7 o'clock at night. The sun's down, but I'm under like bright fluorescent lights. You think evolutionarily that was a common thing? No, it was unheard of. Once the sun was down, your brain saw that the sun was down and said, great, let's make melatonin, let's go to sleep. You wake up in the morning, you see the sunlight, your body says, great, sunlight, it's morning, let's make cortisol, let's wake up. That is not really the case in our society or our lives anymore. We have artificial lighting. So disrupted circadian rhythms are huge. Environmental toxins and pollutants, our environment's full of just crud. Exposure to chronic infections, viruses, a lot of times. Lack of exercise, nutritional deficiencies, poor liver function, anxiety and depression, and chronic disease states. Usually you're aware if you have anxiety or depression, so that's not necessarily a silent stressor, but sometimes you're not aware of, it's one of those things where maybe you've had anxiety for so long it's become your new normal. Sometimes that sounds familiar, and you're not even aware of what it would feel like to not have anxiety. To me, that's a situation where now it's become almost silent. So let's move on to the circadian rhythm and adrenal maladaptation. So this is what we were talking about before a little bit. This is the 24-hour sleep-wake cycle. That in nature, that's what a circadian rhythm is. It's anything that's on a 24-hour cycle. For us, when we refer to our circadian rhythm, what we're actually referring to is our light-dark cycle. So the HPA axis is responsible for the release of cortisol in the morning to give us energy. That's this guy right here, this blue line. And it drops off throughout the day. Of course, it should. We're at our highest level of energy, right? We're at our highest level of energy right here at 7 a.m. And throughout the day, it drops off. And then by the time we're about to go to sleep, it's at its lowest levels. On the other side, we have the pineal gland producing melatonin, this red line. This should be at its lowest level in the morning upon waking. You should basically have no effects of melatonin in the morning. And as the day goes on, it responds to cortisol going down. It responds to the sun going down to come up and then put you to sleep. So the whole point of this is to give us energy during the day and put us to sleep at night. Here is what we see in adrenal maladaptation. So first, let's talk about stage 1. In stage 1, we have cortisol that's being produced in higher than normal levels. So here's a normal curve right here. Here we have somebody in stage 1. You can see here that their curve is still resembling normal. It's just too high. So, this is a stage where you make some simple adjustments, you remove some stressors, you can hopefully come down and be normal again. But it's usually just a matter of reducing cortisol levels, and then you're pretty much good to go. Stage 2 resistance, this is what we discussed happening. Here's your normal curve, and here's this wonky thing that happens. Here we have cortisol, low, way too low in the morning. It finally starts to creep up here. Maybe you're finally at work and the sun is finally up. Maybe you've had, I don't know, a cup of coffee. You're finally starting to wake up. Your cortisol is kind of catching up, right? So it catches up. You might be feeling your best at like 11 o'clock noon, right? And then you're finally cranking, you're doing okay. And then you start to drop off, right? And then here's this pit that people get into about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And you're just like, God, I wish I could nap, right? Now, the biggest difference, I would say, between the third stage and this stage is you'll kind of get this additional spike. And this doesn't always happen, but many times you get this additional spike of cortisol at night. So these are people that we refer to as being wired and tired. So it's at night, you're ready for bed, you've worked all day, you've done whatever you've been doing all day, you should be going to sleep, and unfortunately now you're having your best energy of the day at like 10 o'clock at night. You're trying to lay in bed, you're trying to go to sleep, you got to get up in the morning, but your mind is just racing. So this is the classic presentation of resistance. Here's exhaustion. Third stage of adrenal maladaptation. Now, I would say the vast majority of people are typically in this stage, or they're kind of in this stage, maybe headed towards stage 3. When we see stage 3, we're seeing people who have been chronically ill for a very long time, or for example, somebody who has an autoimmune condition, right? Maybe they're Hashimoto's, maybe they've had female reproductive issues their whole life, and they are experiencing something in their life that's causing them even more stress than they normally feel. So a lot of times you have like a huge stressor that happens, and then people move from stage 2 into stage 3. And what's happening here? Your body, it's not necessarily that you're not producing enough cortisol. It's that you're not producing enough cortisol to keep up with demands of your body, right? So if you have an autoimmune condition, if you have something else going on, tons of stressors, you need probably more cortisol than the average person, and your adrenal glands just aren't keeping up with that demand. So this can actually cause other chronic conditions like autoimmunity to worsen. You can see how this becomes a vicious cycle, right? So let's get into what we do about it. So back to the naturopathic approach. I already explained this pyramid. Now we're going to kind of go through it step by step so we can figure out what to do. So foundational interventions. We need to identify the stage of adrenal maladaptation. This is very important. This is very important because supplementation, nutritional supplementation, so that is to say like vitamins and minerals, cofactors, and botanical medicine, herbal medicine, this should be targeted to the stage of adrenal maladaptation. A lot of times you can go to the health food store, you could pick up a bottle of something that'll say adrenal health. You'll take it. It might make you feel worse. It might make no difference. The reason it's like that is because it hasn't been targeted to the stage you're in. So it's important to determine that first and foremost. Do you have to get a lab test to determine what stage you're in? Yes and no, not necessarily. There are salivary tests that will, there are blood tests that test for cortisol. There are tests that give you that nice cortisol curve like we were looking at, so you can kind of really visualize what stage you're in. I don't think that they're absolutely necessary to have. The way NDs are trained, we're trained to take a very extensive history, really get to know you, really get to understand your lifestyle. Using that information, we can pretty much always figure out what stage you're in and go according to that. We can manage you according to, just the information you've given us. If we feel eventually you need more testing, we can always do that, but typically it's not totally necessary. Another question, should you get other conditions ruled in or out by your primary care before seeking to correct HPA axis dysfunction? Yes, absolutely yes, of course. Lifestyle modifications are always going to help. Dietary change is always going to help. Exercise, of course, but it is important to get, these conditions like anemia or hypothyroidism. We need to know if these are going on before we just address the adrenals. So removing adrenal stressors. These are the silent stressors, right? So what we'll do is we'll basically go through that list of 10 things and figure it out. Is it your inflammatory diet? Is it your inconsistent exercise habits? Your poor sleep hygiene? Are you being exposed to environmental toxin like mold? You have tons of mold in your house. It's very common. Do you have a chronic infection? Do you have nutritional deficiencies? These are the things we need to figure out so we can help them. Some very easy ways for you to reduce stress. These are super simple. This first one sounds kind of cliche, and it seems almost too simplistic. Make a list of things you think are contributing to adrenal stress, because anyone who's watching this, you have some idea of what's contributing. Try to tackle one of these things at a time. Try to tackle them, once a week. Try 1 week to add, more greens to your diet, and the next week get yourself a good HEPA filter for your bedroom. These simple things really, really, really do add up over time, and they're very important. Use a guided meditation app. Headspace is an excellent one. You can download it on your phone. It's free. It's basically a nice man walking you through a meditation. You put your headphones in, sit on your couch, 10 minutes, you kind of zen out for a little while. That goes a long way towards helping. Make time for yourself. An hour every day, try to spend just for you. Probably a lot of you are laughing, but truly, if you can cram in an hour a day, you're not answering to anybody. Ideally, you're not on your phone. You're just doing what you do. You're gardening or reading or whatever it is you like to do. And a quality multivitamin, a lot of times this is dismissed. A lot of times we hear, oh, you don't need a multivitamin. You get all that stuff from your diet. If you're eating like you're supposed to be eating, if you're eating an evolutionary diet, a paleo-style diet, if you're eating vegetables, fruits, and lean meats and healthy fats, sure, I absolutely believe you are getting a multivitamin quantity of what you need in your diet. Most people are not eating like this. If you have the standard American diet, very high saturated fat, very high sugar, lots of refined things, refined flours, refined sugars, you're not getting that multivitamin in your food. So it is beneficial to take one. Creating the conditions for help, like I said before, 75% of the battle. Diet, exercise, sleep. I know this is easier said than done, but if you take it in a step at a time fashion, it's definitely doable. How do diet, exercise, and sleep help the adrenals? With diet, 2 main reasons. Eating an anti-inflammatory, nutrient-dense diet will basically give your body the tools it needs to help mitigate the stress, help rebuild, help resist stress. Stable blood sugar. This cannot be overemphasized. Like I was saying before, a lot of times in our society, we skip our breakfast, we hurry through lunch. Dinner might be something super heavy. You might stop at McDonald's on the way home and eat a Big Mac or something. What this is doing to your blood sugar is making it incredibly unstable. So basically what this is doing is I think you guys can see this, one of these things, right? So you have times of the day where your blood sugar is high. You have times of the day where your blood sugar is tanked. And this wreaks havoc on your adrenal glands. Exercise can make the body more stress resistant. And more importantly, it raises the threshold for cortisol release. So instead of your body releasing cortisol at any little thing, I don't know, you hear a bang from next door and your body's like, oh my God, and you release cortisol. What exercise does is it helps your body to recognize things that are truly stressors and react to them accordingly, but it will be less reactive long term. Sleep, using our light and dark cues, we can reset the circadian rhythm. I'm not going to say easily, but it is doable. Over the long term, using some things that I'll be talking about momentarily, we can definitely go through a long way towards resetting the circadian rhythm. So let's talk about diet. Eat an anti-inflammatory diet. How do you do that? Refined flour and sugar. These are the things that cause your blood sugar to be unstable. So think of things like a candy bar. Okay, you eat a candy bar, your blood sugar is spiking almost immediately. As soon as it hits your system, your blood sugar is going way up. Okay, Instead of doing that, what you want to do is stick with complex carbohydrates. So complex carbohydrate is something like a sweet potato, right? Or a squash, something like a starchy vegetable. Um, Eating something like that will make it so your blood sugar release is more stable, it's more long lasting, gives you more energy throughout the day. It doesn't give you that really high spike of blood sugar and then that crash later. You want to limit dairy as much as possible. At least eliminate cow's milk. Um, things like butter, cheese. These are okay. Cow's milk, I've heard it said before that it is baby cow growth formula, and it's true. It was never really meant for people to drink. It was meant for baby cattle to drink. So just by nature, many times dairy is inflammatory and it will kind of cause these problems. Try to add one large salad a day. Add that with your lunch. I wouldn't necessarily say have it for lunch because you'll be hungry, but at least have it as a side. Pack 3 cups, tightly packed, dark leafy greens, nice salad dressing. Stuff it down. It'll help a lot. Stabilizing your blood sugar. What you want to do, instead of eating 3 large meals a day, you want to eat smaller meals in more frequently, basically. So small fat and protein dense meals every, say, 2 to 3 hours. What this will do is it'll stabilize your blood sugar long term. It'll get rid of all those spikes and crashes. And what you don't want to do is eat carbs by themselves. So a lot of times I hear people say, or I'll ask them, what do you eat for a snack? And they'll be like, oh, I eat fruit. Okay, well, basically all fruit is doing in your system, and I'm not saying fruit is bad, fruit is very good. But what fruit does in your system, you eat it and it becomes sugar. That's basically what fruit is. Fruit is water, sugar, and a little bit of fiber. So if that's all you're eating, it's causing that blood sugar spike in the same way that a candy bar would, except it's giving you vitamins and minerals and it's giving you fiber, but it's still causing the same blood sugar spike. So you want to watch out for that. Always eat breakfast. I know you don't like eating breakfast, and I know you don't have time for eating breakfast. What you can do is you can make a smoothie maybe the night before, and then you could drink that on your way to work. Sometimes that helps. Sometimes people get sick, they just don't feel like eating breakfast. They're just like, oh, I can't even stand the thought of eating breakfast at 8 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes just drinking a smoothie will help that, but that is another thing that'll keep your blood sugar very stable long term. Exercise, basically do it. This is one of those things where, when I say do it, I mean do anything. Do whatever, floats your boat. Whatever activity that you like to do that gets you moving around, that's what you want to be doing. So, some good goals for this, 10,000 steps a day. Yoga 2 to 3 times a week. Even just walking your dogs around the neighborhood every evening. It's good for your dog. It's good for you. And ideally, some light resistance training 2 to 3 times a week. So, some weightlifting at the gym, maybe you take a strength class at the gym. Any of these things are going to be very beneficial. So let's talk about sleep. Let's talk about these light and dark cues, right? So the most important thing you can do for yourself in the morning, and I know some people get up before the sun, I understand that. Basically, as soon as you are able upon waking, expose yourself to sunlight if you can. If it's an overcast day, what you can do, you can flip all the lights on in your room. That partially helps, but what you really want is a full spectrum light. And you can actually get these. You can get a full spectrum light on Amazon. They're not that expensive. But what you do is as soon as you're exposing yourself to that bright, bright light, ideally sunlight, your body is getting the cues to stop producing melatonin, start producing cortisol. That is the number one cue that your body uses to stop producing melatonin and wake you up is the sunlight. So immediately upon waking, if you can go outside, if it's nice enough, go outside. If you can have your exercise in the morning, that's even better. That'll help you even more. I know the first few times you'll feel crummy doing it, but in the long run, it'll really help. At night, you want to avoid looking at lit screens. So again, at night, what are we doing? We're all laying in our beds, watching TV, we're flipping through Facebook, looking at our phone, we're looking at our tablet. All that's doing is it's creating an artificial source of light for your brain to see and think, oh, well, it's still daylight. I'll still go ahead and make cortisol and I'm not going to make melatonin. So at least an hour before you go to bed, stop looking at lit stuff. I know it's hard. I know you like to watch or look at Facebook before you go to bed. Read a book, you know, do something boring like that. But you want to try to avoid looking at those lit screens. This may seem a little counterintuitive to people. Eat your last meal, including a complex carb like a sweet potato, no more than an hour or two before going to bed. Why is this important? Because usually people will be like, well, if I eat before I go to bed, that'll keep me up. You know, your body may take some adjustment, but what you want to do is ensure that your blood sugar overnight is stable. How do you do that? You eat a complex carb that will slowly release sugar for you throughout the night. Because when you are, you know, if you haven't eaten hours and hours before you go to bed, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning rolls around, your body is sensing that you have no blood sugar, and your body's saying, hey, cortisol, we need to get, you know, we need to get going. Cortisol needs to be released so we can raise blood sugar and we can go on with our life. If that blood sugar tank is happening and cortisol is being released, you are awake. You want to avoid that. Eat your last meal, hour or two before bed. Complex carb, ideally, a fat, something to give you that blood sugar throughout the night. And sleep in complete darkness. Again, at night, the least light you're exposed to, the better off you are. In the morning, the more light you're exposed to, the better off you are. These are very simple things that you can do to help reset the circadian rhythm. Targeted nutritional botanical supplementation. Again, these really need to be fit to the individual, but I can give some general suggestions. Vitamins and minerals have for sure been shown and have been studied to be good for stress resistance. They help with the HPA axis. Certain botanicals called adaptogens have been proven in multiple clinical trials that support overall health. They decrease stress and anxiety, improve mood, increase stamina and endurance. They help the immune system. They're just beneficial overall, but what they're especially beneficial for is stress. So real quick, a word about supplement quality. The stuff that you are getting from Walgreens or Walmart or Costco or Sam's Club, whatever, these are not the same thing as what you would get from a practitioner. So basically the good supplement quality companies that have good quality control, that are pharmaceutical grade, they won't sell, they typically will not sell directly to you as a consumer. What they do is they sell to a practitioner, like an ND, and then your ND makes recommendations and then you take those supplements. That is the ideal way to do it. Supplements that you get online from, like, you know, Amazon or wherever, you really don't know where they're coming from, China, and you have no real, you know, guarantee of what's in them. So you guys might remember this study that was done a year ago, that looked at all these different supplements at, you know, these chain stores and found that basically what they were claiming to have in there wasn't even in there at all. And that's part of it. That's part of the problem, is these kind of like off-brand supplements. They're just not good quality. They're not what they're claiming to be. So some supplements for adrenal health. B vitamins are a huge, huge one for adrenals, especially B1, 2, 5, and 6. Vitamin C is very beneficial for the adrenal glands, magnesium as well. All have been shown to improve adrenal function and decrease overall stress. Some of the names of the herbs I was talking about before, adaptogens, are these guys. Rhodiola, you think of this a lot for brain function, brain fog. I think of this for students very frequently. Ashwagandha, very good one, also beneficial for the thyroid. Eleutherococcus, this one's really good for stamina. Athletes will use this a lot of times to increase their performance. Panax species, so like Panax ginseng, so like Siberian ginseng, Asian ginseng. These are the ones that I think are pretty recognizable to people. You often see these. Those are very helpful. Licorice is a good one. This is especially good for the stage 3 adrenal exhaustion. And as far as other or more basic supplements, quality multivitamin, probiotic, omega-3 fish oils, these can go a long, long way towards making you feel better. Are you going to take them one day and feel amazing? No. These are, you know, these supplements, and this is one of the bigger differences between supplements and medications. You know, medications, yeah, they come with side effects and, you know, a whole bevy of different things. But typically, you're taking a medication, you feel its effects right away, right? Supplements, you need longer time. You need consistency. So if you're taking these 3 supplements, multi, probiotic, omega-3, you know, as time goes on, you'll feel better and better. So Further testing, sometimes necessary, sometimes not. If you haven't had other conditions that should have been ruled out, you should always get those ruled out. Occasionally, lifestyle modification, the dietary changes, the supplements, all the things that NDs do, occasionally these don't work out to the point that you wanted them to. Like you thought after you were done, and maybe this is true for some of you, you've been through conventional medicine and it didn't work so well. You've gone the holistic route, and that didn't work so well either. And you're like, why am I not 100%? What am I missing, right? What's the missing piece of the puzzle? Something that we do at Veta that is kind of unique is something we call naturopathic genetic analysis. What we do is we take the results from a 23andMe genetic test. Some of you may already have results. You can go to their website, you can order this. They charge $200. They send you back a bunch of raw data that you look at and you're like, I don't know what the heck this means. This is very confusing. But you send us that raw data and we look at your genes. And what we're basically looking at is things called SNPs. These are single nucleotide polymorphisms. And what that basically means is small genetic defects. And using these, we can very specifically target whatever enzymes might be deficient. So, vitamins, minerals, cofactors, we can make these very specific to your particular picture. So this can go a long way towards making up that additional, maybe you're at 75% better, making up that additional 25%. So wrapping up the presentation, I want you guys to ask yourself these questions. On a scale of 1 to 10, how sick and tired do you feel? Okay. 10 being the crummiest, the worst you've ever felt in your life. You're so exhausted you can't get out of bed. And 1 being, no, I feel fine. I feel good. No problem. If you're rating yourself as like a 6 to 7 out of 10, or less than a 6 to 7 out of 10, you're rating yourself, 5-ish. Make some of these changes. I'll be posting this webinar after we're done. You can look back through the PowerPoint, figure out some dietary changes you want to make, maybe an exercise program, pick yourself out a supplement, see what happens, see if your symptoms improve, because they very well may. It may just take some simple tweaks and you'll be well on your way. If you rate yourself 7 to 10 out of 10, you're one of those people that can't get out of bed in the morning, you're awake all night, you're miserable. If there are things in your life that you can no longer do because you are so sick, please make an appointment. Okay? Make an appointment because you might need help outside of, making simple changes. Ask yourself if you have the willpower or motivation to make a change. Are you ready to take control of your health? If your answer is no, that's fine. If you're unsure, that's fine. And I've heard this quote a couple times. Michael Jordan needed a coach. Everybody needs help sometimes. Everybody does. We're all the same like that. Sometimes you need somebody else to pick up the slack, and sometimes you need to take control of your own health before you can do anything else. If you had somebody guiding you, are you willing to make serious lifestyle changes in order to take control of your health? Are you willing to change your diet? Are you willing to do some exercise? Are you willing to take supplements consistently? If the answer is yes, and you are ready to stop being sick, you're ready to stop being exhausted, schedule your first 2 appointments. Let me help you. The first 2 consults consist of these 2 things. Initial interview, this is when we'll be basically sitting down and you will be talking to me. You will be telling me all about your health. You'll be telling me all about your health from the first moment you started to feel crummy. We will be getting to the absolute bottom of what is causing your issues. You'll be bringing any past lab work, any medical history, and we will be doing a comprehensive history. Between your first appointment and your second appointment, I will be doing a lot of research. I will research your case very specifically. I will look over everything you have brought me. I will analyze it, and I will come up with a plan for you. At your second visit, the complete health assessment, what we'll be doing is we'll spend another hour together, and you'll come, and instead of coming to talk, you'll be coming to learn. So I'll be going over your plan with you because I want you to have a complete understanding of what can be done to help you with your condition. A very well laid out schedule. You will have no questions or concerns. I will make sure that they are all answered. We'll discuss everything you brought me. what is causing the condition in the plan. We'll also discuss program package and payment options, basically at that time. The cost of the first 2 consults, I typically charge $200 per hour, okay? What I do is I like to have those first 2 visits. It's not 1 first visit, it's 2 first visits, for the reasons I've already laid out. These 2 visits together, typically I charge $250, okay? If you sign up for within the next 24 hours of this webinar, so by tomorrow at 8 p.m., $200, okay? I'm offering the first 2 consultations, $200. It's a $400 value, basically half off. Really want you to get help. I ask this be paid upon scheduling. If you come in, your first appointment, we sit down together. If I feel I can't help you, if I feel you need the help of another kind of practitioner, I will make you a recommendation. I will refund your money. No problem. If you do sign up for a program, my programs are typically 6, 12, and 18 weeks long. I will take that initial $200 and I will roll it into the cost of your package, which is basically to say, you're getting the first 2 appointments free because I'm just adding that to the cost of your program. Real quick word about payment. I don't take insurance. I can't take insurance. Like I said before, unfortunately, NDs in the state of Illinois were not licensed yet. Therefore, we're not allowed to take insurance. I manage and I support people, not conditions. So my conditions to you, all I'm asking for is your best effort. I'm asking for your accountability. I'm asking you to be dedicated to your health program. If you do that, if you are compliant, if you are dedicated, if you're making the changes, I absolutely promise you, you will see a difference. I also ask for time. Basically, I don't do a visit to visit basis. I do programs. The reason is because if we did it visit to visit, I would be absolutely selling you short. I would be wasting your money, right? Because I want you to have plenty of access to me. I want you to be able to be at the grocery store on a Sunday evening and think to yourself, oh, I wonder if I could eat this. I wish I could ask my doctor. You can message me and I will answer you. We will be meeting every week to every 2 weeks. Your questions will never go unanswered. I'll always be checking in with you. So you can see why I don't do a visit to visit type basis. Programs do range in price from $1,125 to about $2,000. If that's a bit of a sticker shock, I don't blame you. I understand completely. I want you to ask yourself, and that's why I asked you before, is your health worth it? That's what I want to know. If you're very sick, and if you're very sick of being sick, it's worth it. It's worth it to do a program. It's worth it to be immersed in something like this to really make long-term lasting changes. These prices, I mean, this one right here, I literally spent on my cat's health January of this year. That might be familiar to some of you. We tend to be very willing to spend money on things that are outside of us, vacations, cars, pets. Unfortunately, we as a society are hesitant to spend money on our health. Totally understand. But if you want to get quality healthcare, you kind of have to dig into your pockets. How do you schedule an appointment? Please call or text 847-744-8484. My lovely receptionist, Claire, will answer and get you scheduled. You can also visit our website, anwnapathic.com. If you're on the website for more than, I think it's like 15 seconds, a little pop-up will come up and you can click schedule your appointment. Or you can go to the About tab, and under that About tab, you'll see Contact. You click Contact, you can schedule an appointment online. My physical office is in Schaumburg, Illinois. Walden Office Square, this is 3 office buildings. They look kind of similar, but they're right off of I-90. If you are too far away to come to the office, if you're kind of a hike from Schaumburg, no problem. The way I have set this up is we can meet completely online, and yes, we can do that for your entire program. We can have our consultations entirely online. All you need is the internet and a webcam. Most laptops come with them now, and you'll be able to see me, and I'll be able to see you just like you're right across from me in my office. Once your appointment is scheduled, I'll be sending you a new client welcome packet via email. Usually 24 hours is how long it takes. You'll have your paperwork in there, your invoice for the $200, and your instructions to make an account with our online portal, which is called Fruit Street. That is how we interact online. And we do the the messaging. You're even able to take pictures of your food, and I can give you feedback right away. You can upload your Fitbit, and I can get all that information that comes from a Fitbit. I can get it on my end, and I'm able to make you recommendations based on what I see in real time. So that's really, really cool. Please, if this is ringing a bell to you, if any of this sounds familiar, if you want help getting your life back, if you don't want to take any more drugs, if you don't want to be tired all the time, please let me help you. I would love to help you. I would love to, have a relationship with you, be your friend, and be your go-to, your coach, and really help you to feel better. And now I will take any questions. This might take a moment for me to see them. Hi, Dr. Rossop. Do we have any questions?
Just one.
Just one. Let's see. So Patty asks, can the adrenal glands recover and function normally after, let's see.
Stressors are removed.
Oh, after the stressors are removed. Yes, absolutely. If all you're doing is removing the stressors and nothing else, say, all you're doing is you quit your stressful job, or, you tweak your diet a little bit. If all you're doing is removing those stressors and you're not doing the rest of it, they can get better. They will get better. It'll just take longer. What we do with naturopathic medicine is we try to remove those stressors, but we also try to speed the process, because nobody has time to feel like this. So if we use the targeted botanical medicine, if we use nutritional supplementation, we can definitely help speed the process and they can heal faster. I think that's it. All right, thank you very much for being with me tonight. If you ever have any questions, please feel free. There's a place on my website for you to go ahead and send questions in. My email is anwnaturopathic@gmail.com. You could always email me there, or you can always call or text the number 847-744-8484, and we are very happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you guys, and have a wonderful night.